For centuries, Atlantis was dismissed as pure legend, a mythical island nation conjured by Plato to warn of pride and power. But what if that ancient warning wasn't fiction, but prophecy? And what if Atlantis wasn't just real, but has already been found and quietly hidden from the public eye? Recent underwater scans off the coast of Western Africa have revealed something astonishing. Symmetrical structures buried beneath the waves, precisely where ancient sources placed the gateway to a lost empire. Advanced sonar mapping, forbidden excavation reports, and satellite imagery all point to one chilling possibility. Atlantis may have never vanished at all. It was buried and deliberately forgotten. They told us Atlantis was a myth, that no advanced civilization existed 12,000 years ago. But new discoveries, ignored by mainstream academia, suggest otherwise. Advanced infrastructure, megalithic construction, and inexplicable engineering are beginning to surface. And if these pieces fit, they could rewrite everything we know about human history. What did Atlantis really look like? Who built it? And why was it erased from history? The answers lie not in legend, but beneath the sea. Let's dive into the evidence. In the windswept deserts of Mauritania, in a region so remote and vast it's nicknamed the Eye of the Sahara, lies a geological formation so massive it can only truly be seen from space. Known as the Richat structure, this immense, concentric ring formation stretches over 28 miles across, eerily matching the very description Plato gave of Atlantis, a circular city of alternating rings of water and land. At first glance, the Richat structure was believed to be a natural formation, a collapsed dome carved by erosion over millions of years. But recent high-resolution satellite images have revealed strange, symmetrical features embedded within the rings, features that resemble man-made canals, walls, and causeways. A closer study reveals that the rings follow geometric proportions far too regular to be explained by erosion alone. And most unsettling of all, the Richat structure sits at the exact latitude Plato described. In Timaeus and Critias, Plato claims Atlantis was beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, situated in the Atlantic Ocean, near a large plain surrounded by mountains and accessible only through narrow channels. Mauritania fits the bill with uncanny precision. Even more intriguing, geological evidence confirms that this region was once underwater. Roughly 12,000 years ago, during the end of the Younger Dryas period, the Sahara was lush, green, and flooded by seasonal rivers, conditions that would have made the Richat structure not a desert, but a prime location for a thriving civilization surrounded by navigable waters. So why haven't we heard more about this? Because the official narrative claims Atlantis never existed, that Plato made it up, that there's no evidence of a global civilization at the end of the last ice age. But what if we've simply been looking in the wrong places? Or worse, what if the evidence is being ignored on purpose? A 2018 expedition to the Richat structure conducted soil sampling and ground-penetrating radar sweeps. The team reported strange anomalies, linear cavities, underground chambers, and high concentrations of metallurgical residue deep within the rock. Some even claimed the presence of melted stone, consistent with high-temperature technologies that shouldn't have existed 10,000 plus years ago. Yet, their findings never made mainstream headlines. Their data was dismissed, their funding pulled, because if Atlantis was real and if it was technologically advanced, it would destroy the foundations of modern archaeology. Even ancient Egyptian texts reference a land of the West that perished in a single night. Could this be the same cataclysm Plato described? Massive earthquakes and floods wiping out an entire civilization? And if so, was Atlantis not a myth, but the missing link between prehistoric cultures? The Richat structure may not just be a natural wonder. It could be the erased epicenter of ancient global knowledge. And now, as new surveys reveal geometric alignments, ancient pathways, and buried walls, the mystery deepens. Next, we'll dive into the evidence mainstream science says shouldn't exist at all. proof of technologies and architecture that predate all known civilizations by thousands of years. When mainstream archaeology dates the beginning of advanced civilization, it places humanity's first cities around 5,000 years ago: Sumer, Mesopotamia, Egypt. But what if that timeline is off by thousands of years? What if a lost civilization, Atlantis, already mastered the art of urban design, engineering, and construction, only to be wiped from history? That's exactly what emerging data from the Richat structure is beginning to suggest. Let's start with stone analysis. Multiple expeditions, both official and unofficial, have retrieved samples from the Richat site showing evidence of intense heat and toolworking. Among these are traces of vitrified stone, rock that has been melted and re-solidified, as if exposed to extreme temperatures, much like what happens during nuclear explosions or highly advanced metallurgical processes. According to current academic consensus, no culture on Earth 12,000 years ago possessed that kind of technology. But here, in the supposed natural rings of the Sahara, we find stone formations with microscopic striations, as if they were once carved or cut using precise instruments. Sandstone slabs that appear to be deliberately angled, laid out in 90-degree intersections and aligned with celestial markers, mirroring ancient Egyptian and Mesoamerican traditions, but millennia earlier. Then there's the matter of the canals. Plato described Atlantis as being made of alternating rings of land and water, with canals connecting the central city to the sea. Critics long claimed that such a design was implausible. But modern imaging technologies now show depressions within the Richat rings that align perfectly with water flow paths, ancient riverbeds, dry deltas, and what could very well be man-made channels. Even more mysterious, circular harbor-like formations discovered at the heart of the structure. These suggest not only a complex knowledge of hydraulic engineering, but a mastery of geometry, scale, and city planning. Satellite imagery processed by digital terrain modeling has shown elevated platforms, symmetrical structures, and grids that do not occur naturally. If these features are man-made, and many geologists and independent researchers believe they are, then the Richat structure is not just an odd geological dome. It's the blueprint of Atlantis itself. But the evidence doesn't end with the land. Off the west coast of Africa, sonar scans and LiDAR data reveal underwater anomalies, rectangular formations, megalithic blocks, and submerged stone platforms near the Canary Islands and the Azores. In several cases, these formations are aligned with solstices, suggesting a cultural link to ancient sun-worshipping civilizations or an advanced understanding of astronomy lost to time. Now consider this. Ancient Egyptian records, especially the writings of Solon, the Athenian lawmaker who learned of Atlantis from Egyptian priests, stated that Atlantis predated Egypt by thousands of years. If the Egyptian dynasties arose around 3100 BCE, that would put Atlantis at around 9600 BCE, the exact date Plato gives, and the exact date of the catastrophic Younger Dryas climate event. Is this a coincidence? Or does it match a global pattern? Around the same period, structures like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey suddenly emerge. Massive stone pillars, intricately carved and buried intentionally. Göbekli Tepe predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years, and yet we're told it was built by hunter-gatherers. How does a nomadic society build astronomically aligned megalithic temples? Unless, of course, they didn't. Unless those ruins, and others like them, are remnants of a civilization far older, passed down or inherited by survivors of a cataclysm that wiped their world from the face of the earth. The evidence at the Richat structure suggests more than erosion. It suggests intent, design, civilization. Even more unsettling, recent ground-penetrating radar surveys have identified what appear to be multi-level substructures beneath the outer rings. These could be buried chambers, vaults, or even the ruins of what was once an Atlantean acropolis. And despite all this, no formal archaeological dig has ever been approved at the site. Why? Because if the Richat structure is Atlantis, then everything we know about the origin of civilization collapses. We've been told that the wheel, writing, and the city all originated in Mesopotamia. But if these structures date back to 11,000 BCE, then that narrative is not just flawed, it's false. So the question becomes, if there really was an advanced civilization in prehistory, where else did it leave its mark? Next, we'll follow the clues, tracing ancient maps, Old World myths, and transoceanic connections to see if Atlantis left behind a global fingerprint, one etched into the foundations of every ancient culture on Earth. If Atlantis was real, and if it was as technologically advanced and far-reaching as Plato described, it wouldn't have left evidence in just one place. Its echoes would ripple across continents, appearing in the myths, monuments, and megalithic mysteries of ancient civilizations scattered around the globe. And that's exactly what we find. Let's start with the maps. One of the most controversial pieces of evidence is the Piri-Reis map, created in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral who claimed it was compiled using ancient source maps dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. What makes this map so extraordinary is that it accurately depicts the coastlines of South America and Antarctica, centuries before modern discovery. Even more baffling, the Antarctic coastline shown is free of ice, meaning it represents a view of the continent from before it was covered in glaciers, likely over 12,000 years ago. How could medieval map makers depict something only observable with aerial mapping and radar technology? Unless the original source maps came from civilization that existed before the last ice age ended, just like Atlantis. And the Piri-Reis map isn't alone. The Orontius Phineas and Bwatch maps show similar knowledge of ancient geography and impossible precision. They seem to indicate that someone thousands of years ago had global cartographic capabilities. Could that someone have been Atlantis? Let's turn to the sea, the lifeblood of any advanced maritime civilization. Plato described the Atlanteans as seafarers with powerful navies who colonized parts of Europe and Africa. Across these regions, from Spain to Morocco, from the Canary Islands to the Amazon, we find ancient legends of bearded, pale-skinned god-kings who arrived by sea, taught the people agriculture, astronomy, and architecture, and then vanished. The Olmecs, the earliest Mesoamerican civilization, carved colossal stone heads with distinctly African and Caucasian features, completely out of place in ancient Mexico. In Peru, the ruins of Pumapunku and Tiwanaku exhibit stonework so advanced, precision-cut blocks weighing hundreds of tons with seamless joins, that modern engineers still can't explain how it was done without diamond tools or cranes. The similarities between Old World and New World architecture, pyramids, megaliths, astronomical alignments, and underground chambers are too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. From Giza to Teotihuacan, from Stonehenge to Nabta Playa, the same blueprint repeats. Even symbolism and mythologies echo the same themes. A golden age destroyed by a flood, celestial knowledge, serpent gods, and a great fall from power. The Hopi, Sumerians, Dogon, Egyptians, and Maya all speak of a time when divine or semi-divine beings walked among them, before a catastrophic event changed the world. And all of this converges around a single timeline. Circa 9,600 BCE, the exact date Plato assigned to Atlantis' destruction. We now know that something significant did happen around this time. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests that a fragmented comet struck Earth, triggering rapid climate change, megafaunal extinction, and a global flood, exactly the kind of disaster that could wipe an advanced civilization off the map. Yet despite the mounting geological, mythological, and architectural evidence, mainstream academia refuses to consider the possibility of transoceanic contact before Columbus. Why? Because it challenges the core assumption that ancient peoples were isolated, primitive, and incapable of long-distance travel or complex knowledge systems. But the evidence says otherwise. Consider the Dogon tribe of Mali. Isolated for centuries, they somehow possessed advanced astronomical knowledge of Sirius B, a dwarf star invisible to the naked eye and only confirmed by Western science in the 20th century. They claim this knowledge was given to them by beings from a distant system, or possibly a forgotten culture with cosmic knowledge. And what about the Antikythera mechanism, a mechanical computer from ancient Greece that could predict celestial events with astonishing accuracy? Scholars now say it may have been the product of a lost scientific tradition, perhaps inherited from the survivors of a fallen civilization. The deeper we look, the more we find a global pattern of high knowledge suddenly appearing, only to decline or vanish, as if inherited rather than developed. What if that knowledge was Atlantean? What if the flood myths, ancient maps, pyramid blueprints, and celestial lore all point back to a single source, a pre-Ice Age civilization that seeded the ancient world with its remnants? And if so, then we must ask the next uncomfortable question. Why has this connection been buried for so long? In the next chapter, we'll expose the academic resistance, the institutional suppression, and the deliberate silencing of any research that threatens the accepted historical timeline. Because if Atlantis was real, someone doesn't want you to know. If the evidence is out there, visible from satellites embedded in megaliths, etched into ancient maps, why hasn't the mainstream accepted it? Why does the very idea of Atlantis, despite its global fingerprints, remain relegated to pseudoscience and myth? The answer is chilling. Our understanding of history has been carefully curated, and certain truths are too disruptive to be allowed. Let's begin with academia. Modern archaeology emerged as a discipline in the 19th century, built upon the foundations of Darwinian progressivism, which insisted that humanity evolved in a linear trajectory, from simple cavemen to complex societies. This timeline left no room for advanced Ice Age civilizations. So when anomalous findings appeared, artifacts in geological layers they shouldn't be in, or architectural feats that contradicted the primitive status quo, they were dismissed, buried in archives, or outright destroyed. Take the Smithsonian Institution, for example. In the early 20th century, several whistleblowers claimed that the Smithsonian received shipments of giant human skeletons found buried in mounds across North America, some measuring over 8 feet tall. These remains vanished from the record. Independent researchers and former insiders allege that the bones were destroyed to preserve the narrative that no advanced or anomalous human cultures existed in prehistoric times. Even the CIA and U.S. military have dabbled in the ancient world. Declassified documents reveal Cold War-era missions involving satellite surveillance of archaeological sites, including submerged ruins near the Cuban coast, Yucatan, and the Azores. One particular case involved a 1968 sonar anomaly spotted off the Bahamas, what appear to be massive rectangular structures, potentially part of a sunken city. Military divers investigated. Then silence. The case was sealed and forgotten. Meanwhile, funding for any academic who dares explore alternative prehistory quickly dries up. Grants are denied. Careers ruined. Researchers labeled as fringe, no matter how credible their data. This is not science. This is dogma. Institutions rely on accepted narratives to maintain authority, textbooks, museums, and entire industries. To admit that a global maritime civilization existed before Egypt or Sumer would be to concede that nearly everything we've been taught about our origins is wrong. But it's not just suppression. It's also disinformation. Consider how Atlantis has been culturally weaponized. Hollywood, tabloids, and fantasy literature have reduced it to a cartoon myth. Mermaids, crystal towers, underwater kingdoms, turning a potentially real civilization into a joke. This deliberate trivialization ensures that serious researchers are ignored. Yet ancient texts take Atlantis seriously. Plato wrote about it not as allegory, but history, explicitly stating that the story came from Egyptian priests, passed down through generations. He names cities, describes infrastructure, even lists military capabilities. Why would a philosopher of Plato's stature risk his credibility for fiction? He didn't. The ancients believed Atlantis was real, and they weren't alone. The Hindus told of Dvarka, a sacred city swallowed by the sea, now partially uncovered off India's western coast. The Mesopotamians spoke of Eridu, the first city built by the gods. The Maya wrote of Aslan, a mysterious ancestral homeland across the ocean, destroyed by a cataclysm. All variations of the same vanished world. And yet, time and time again, anyone who draws these connections is branded a conspiracy theorist. Why? Because the implications are staggering. If Atlantis existed, then it possessed technology rivaling our own. It mastered engineering, astronomy, seafaring, and possibly energy systems we still don't understand. If we accept that, then we must also ask, where did that knowledge go? Or more disturbingly, did it survive? There are whispers of secret societies, the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and others, claiming to guard ancient wisdom passed down from the Elder World. These groups revere symbols found across ancient ruins: the eye, the compass, the pyramid, and sacred geometry that traces back to Atlantis. Even modern geopolitics bears its shadow. Nazi Germany's Annener Division, an elite team of occult researchers, scoured the globe for Atlantean remnants, convinced that a super race once ruled Earth. Their obsession wasn't fiction, it was strategic. So what if the truth isn't just being ignored, but actively controlled? What if the remains of Atlantis and its technology have already been discovered and are being hidden, researched, even weaponized by powers who understand just how dangerous that truth could be? The real reason they don't want you to know about Atlantis isn't because it's false. It's because it's true, and far more powerful than we've ever imagined. In the next part, we'll explore what these suppressed truths mean for our history. Because if Atlantis was the progenitor of global civilization, then the ancient world wasn't primitive at all. It was a golden age, abruptly ended and forgotten. Until now, what if everything we've been taught about the origin of civilization is wrong? What if the Sumerians weren't the first? What if the pyramids weren't humanity's earliest architectural marvels? What if humanity's true story didn't begin 5,000 years ago, but was violently interrupted 12,000 years ago by a cataclysm that wiped out a global civilization? A civilization we now call Atlantis. If Atlantis was real, and all the evidence points to it, then the implications ripple across every corner of human history. We're no longer the pinnacle of a slow, evolutionary climb. We are the children of survivors, the inheritors of a lost world whose knowledge, technology, and spiritual understanding far surpassed our own. Let's revisit the Rikat structure. If this formation in Mauritania truly housed the Atlantean capital, then it means advanced urban planning existed when the Sahara was lush and filled with rivers. Evidence of canals, melted stone, and possible metallurgy indicates that these people weren't primitive nomads. They were engineers, astronomers, builders. The geometric precision suggests mathematical systems far beyond what we associate with the Neolithic period. Even the Great Pyramid of Giza, once considered the peak of ancient engineering, begins to look derivative. Its alignment with cardinal points, its internal chambers, and its use of the golden ratio all suggest a legacy of Atlantean design principles. The further we go back, the more refined the knowledge appears. This reverses the narrative we've been told, that humanity progresses in a straight line. Instead, we see a high starting point, followed by collapse and forgetfulness. Think about Göbekli Tepe, a megalithic temple complex in modern-day Turkey, carbon dated to nearly 12,000 years ago. Built with T-shaped pillars, astronomical alignments, and animal iconography, this structure appeared overnight, without any precedent, scaffolding, or learning curve. Then, it was deliberately buried. Why? And more importantly, by whom? Could it have been survivors of Atlantis, attempting to preserve knowledge in the wake of a global disaster? And they wouldn't have been alone. Across the globe, megalithic construction appears suddenly and mysteriously. In Peru, stone blocks at Sacsayhuaman are so precisely cut they fit together without mortar and are earthquake-resistant. In Baalbek, Lebanon, massive stone blocks weighing over 1,000 tons are found in the foundations, too large for modern cranes, let alone Bronze Age tech. Are we looking at original Atlantean colonies? Or did these civilizations inherit lost knowledge through ancient priesthoods, oral traditions, or even surviving artifacts. The ancient Vedas of India speak of Vimanas, flying machines used in ancient wars. The Popol Vuh, a sacred Mayan text, tells of gods from across the sea who brought wisdom and then vanished. In Egypt, the priests of Heliopolis spoke of Zep Tepi, the first time, a golden era before the flood when gods walked among men and built the monuments we now attribute to later dynasties. These aren't isolated myths. They're global echoes of a shared trauma and a shared memory. A memory is something real. What if Atlantis wasn't just a city, but a network? A global seafaring culture, establishing outposts, sharing knowledge, and leaving behind megalithic fingerprints on every continent? This would explain the global obsession with pyramids, the shared myth of a great flood, the sudden appearance of agriculture and astronomy, the consistent use of sacred geometry, the lost maps showing pre-glacial coastlines, even the concept of gods might be misunderstood memories of Atlantean sages, whose technological prowess appeared magical to their descendants. If Atlantis was real, then we aren't evolving from ignorance. We are recovering from amnesia. And this isn't just a question of archaeology. It's a question of identity. Who are we, really? What are we capable of? And what have we lost? Because if there was once a global civilization before the last ice age, with technology, knowledge, and power we still don't understand, then that same rise and fall could happen again. Or worse, it already is. As we face global climate change, tectonic instability, and shifting magnetic fields, are we repeating the same cycle? Have we learned anything from the civilization that came before us? In the final chapter, we'll explore the ultimate question: what was Atlantis really? A lost continent? A civilization? Or something even more profound? A cosmic legacy that challenges not just history, but the very foundations of what it means to be human. What if Atlantis was never just a city or a continent or a culture? What if it was the mother civilization, the seed from which all ancient empires grew? The fountainhead of knowledge, technology, and cosmology that spread across the globe long before history books even begin? This is the chilling and awe-inspiring possibility we now face. Because the evidence doesn't just point to a lost city buried beneath the sands of Mauritania. It points to a forgotten epoch of human greatness, a time when our ancestors harnessed energy, mastered astronomy, and built in harmony with the stars. A time when they understood things we've barely begun to rediscover. Let's return one last time to Plato. He described Atlantis as a utopian civilization, ruled by philosopher kings, rich in natural resources, and powered by mysterious energies. The Atlanteans constructed canals, temples, and walls clad in orichalcum, an alloy lost to time. They possessed a unified cosmology, linking heaven and earth, human and divine. Now think about what the ancient world inherited after Atlantis supposedly fell. The Great Pyramid, built with uncanny precision, aligned to the stars. Mayan temples, encoding the precession of the equinoxes in stone. Sumerian tablets, describing planets beyond visible range. Vedic texts, detailing quantum concepts in metaphysical terms. These were not primitive cultures fumbling in the dark. These were the echoes of a golden age, an age destroyed by cataclysm, buried by rising seas, and forgotten by modern science. But not completely forgotten, because fragments survived. The sacred geometry, the megalithic codes, the esoteric teachings, they endured, not in mainstream textbooks, but in mystery schools, oral traditions, and underground knowledge systems. And those fragments point to something even more profound, that Atlantis wasn't just a place, it was a paradigm. A worldview in which humans were custodians of Earth, not its exploiters. In which technology was used to elevate consciousness, not dominate it. In which the stars weren't just lights in the sky, but portals, teachers, and guides. This is what ancient legends tell us. This is what the ruins whisper. That we fell, not just physically, but spiritually. And in that fall, we lost more than cities. We lost ourselves. If Atlantis was real, then our current civilization is not the first, nor the most advanced. It is a rebuild, a recovery effort. And if we ignore the warnings carved into stone about pride, imbalance, and cosmic cycles, we risk repeating the very fall that buried Atlantis in the first place. But here's the most mind-bending possibility of all. What if Atlantis wasn't originally from Earth at all? Some theorists propose that Atlantis was not merely an ancient civilization, but an offshoot of a much older, possibly extraterrestrial race. Survivors from a dying star system, who seeded Earth with knowledge and built a new society from scratch. This would explain the sudden explosion of intelligence, the unexplained maps, the genetic anomalies, and the obsession with the stars across all ancient cultures. Is this why ancient myths speak of gods descending from the sky? Why the Dogon tribe knew of Sirius B? Why pyramids appear across Earth and Mars in striking geometric parallels? Was Atlantis a bridge between the stars and humanity? If so, its destruction wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a cosmic rupture. And now, as we stand at the edge of our own planetary crisis, Atlantis emerges not as a forgotten city, but as a mirror, a warning, a memory rising from the depths. Not fiction, not allegory, truth disguised as myth. So we must ask ourselves, what else have we forgotten? What other truths lie buried, beneath the sand, beneath the sea, beneath the stories we were told to believe? The quest for Atlantis is not just an archaeological mystery. It's a revelation of who we are, who we were, and who we might become again. Because the moment we remember Atlantis is the moment we begin to remember ourselves. If even part of the Atlantean legacy is true, then the history we've inherited is not just incomplete. It's been sanitized, simplified, and controlled. A global civilization that predates Egypt and Sumer. That mapped the world before the Ice Age ended. That understood the stars, sacred geometry, and energy systems far beyond modern comprehension, and then was wiped away by cosmic catastrophe. What if this lost civilization is the real origin of our myths, gods, and megaliths? What if Atlantis is the missing chapter in the human story? And more importantly, what if some of its secrets still remain? In buried ruins, in forbidden texts, in your DNA? Subscribe for more deep dive revelations into ancient mysteries, forbidden history, and the truths they never wanted you to ask. Because when you start to connect the dots, you begin to see the outline of something extraordinary. Not a myth, not a legend, but a lost truth waiting to be rediscovered.